it's such a unique and incredible song, and moving through the acts of ballad into opera, into rock, and then into coda was really fascinating. What a bold risk to take for a song. But then also, like, if you step back, and I just kept looking at it because I don't have the musical chops and know what is going on in the mind of the artist, but it's fascinating to me that you can feel the energies shift in the song. Like, that's what was resonant for me, right? And so I spent a couple of days and a lot of conversations with the robot pushing that direction, and it wasn't organic. Like, it didn't happen quickly or easily to kind of land on where I wanted to go with it. But the premise of ballad representing a more pure expression, kind of not overlaid with too many other musical notes, and then into opera, which in this case was really, for me, schizophrenic confrontation. A million voices going on in the head, right? And that's what was represented in the song, which was incredible. And also the voices are taunting and kind of like, I don't deserve this. And like, is it going to be good? Heaven? Is it going to be bad? Hell? You know, it's going through all the things. And then distilling that into one clear statement through the rock. You can't do this to me, right? It's just pure defiance. And then finally into coda, the point of acceptance. And Lindsay highlighted the fact that this is a morphing of the tone of the journey into somebody that was once kind of coping and playing at life, which is, I don't really care. And then into the end, having no choice anymore, right? And that too is a fascinating dynamic maybe we can circle back to. Because I think it plagues more people than it seems, and it probably plagues all of us at some time. Like, how often are we managing our own expectations and playing small just because maybe we don't think the other side is for us? I think it's a really useful question to keep on the surface. But yeah, so in some of the design there, another fascinating component that came up was looking at the skin's orientation. And this didn't really play out in the event, but it's pretty clear when you kind of step back and feel through it that when we're dealing in the ballad portion of the song, we've got somebody that he's kind of laissez-faire. We could point to that being a little bit shapeshifter-esque, but the reveal of the song is that, yeah, this isn't somebody that doesn't care at all. This is somebody that probably cares too much and doesn't have the ability to manage their own expectations. They don't think they can have what they want. He talks about, looking up and seeing the open skies, but at the same time, there's like this landslide of external forces pulling him along, right? He's very much in victimhood throughout the early portion, and then commits murder. And if we look at that in an abstract way, it's like this pure act of passion. We're dealing at the inception of the creative process, the true act of passion without feedback as being the domain of the asset, which I think is brilliant. And to truly create something, it has to have this sense of being open, unbridled, unconstrained. Like, that's not where a creative process doesn't start with constraints. It starts with divergent thinking, looking at options, exploring, seeing what resonates, what feels proper. And then you start to move into convergent thinking and how you can distill that into a clear point of focus. But he's all over the place. He's like, well, looking up at the open skies, maybe it doesn't matter. Nobody loves or cares about me. It's all just open space, but a lot of negativity, but a lot of feeling. Like, you can see that. And then we move into the domain of the sage, which is really interesting with opera. And the song is brilliant because it expresses all these in low grade until we get to the end, but they're all low grade representations of the skins. And they're all super relatable, right? So we get into the schizophrenic voices and we have the sage that is unraveling. So there's maybe confluence between like the asset and the sage, because they both share the vertical axis of consciousness or attention. And so the moving between them isn't like, it's not a big leap, but the openness of the asset can become porous, taking in too much information. But the dialogue and the thought process of maybe this will work, maybe nobody will care, maybe nobody will accept me, maybe, this could be my next great thing. All those voices are the sage without constraint. So it's like the analysis is there, right? I'm focusing, but I can't stay fixed on one signal. It's all kind of oscillating between expansion, noise, and but what about this? But what about that? What about this other thing? And we all do that. And I think knowing that we all do that, for me, that's a potential superpower in the creative process. Like anything that you want to create, just going in knowing, as soon as this goes beyond an idea in the head, as soon as you tell somebody, as soon as you take first steps in action, as soon as you present it in the world, there's a point of real contact that all of a sudden produces a mirror, and you start to see yourself. And then it's like, what have I done? Like, can I keep going? Like, what if somebody sees this? I don't know if I want to be public. Like, it has all this stuff. Joanna, recently, I know you've got
I can't imagine what you're possibly talking about.
Yeah.
What that feels like.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah.
It's
super cool.
It's the monkey mind on steroids. And it's a representation of the sage focus at a very low capacity, because all of these could be true, but you're not able to clearly filter. Because look, if it is bad enough, and if the world is going to hate you, and if the world is going to reject the art, it's like, don't do the thing. Like, do the next thing. Like, move on. But that's not happening. On the other hand, if the signal was strong enough for, this is meaningful. Like, you do it even if it doesn't work. If that's strong enough, you take the next step. But the oscillation between all of these is the real conflict, right? And every artist experiences this insanity. But having that represented in opera is fucking brilliant, because it's what everybody does at that stage of creation. And then the power of moving into commitment, defiance, rock music in the third act, or the third portion of the song, is where the warrior steps in and distills this. We could also say that the sage has a role of consolidating and distilling into one focal point, maybe in that moment, but the truth is the warrior steps in on force and becomes that dominant voice and says, in the song, he just says, you can't stone me and spit in my eye, but it's a giant fuck you to every voice that is saying no. And and that's interesting. And this is kind of a beside the point, but it's an interesting correlation, and it might provide value in terms of self-management of a creative process. But back in the day when I had a studio, I had, punctuality rules and things like this, and they were modest at first, and if they were repeat, then they started to get pretty steep and awful. And if somebody did something like was a no-show or didn't have a courtesy call, it was an immediately terrible thing for them. But generally, like, it was somewhere between like 100 and 400 squats, depending on the level of transgression. If it was a courtesy call in advance, but they were just a minute late, then it's 100 squats. Okay. Which can suck if you're not in great shape, and at first that's not fun. If it happens repeatedly, that starts to rise, or if it's a lack of consideration, or no courtesy call, then those numbers get bumped up quickly, and a 400 squat would normally take a full session. And so somebody's effectively, look, it's still fitness, but they're giving up a session that could be more global for just, penance. But there's only, in all the time that I did this, most people just accepted it as a point of moving on. But there was one guy that was like, why do you do that? It's like, it's very militant. And I was like, maybe. But in my mind, there's only two ways through bad behavior. You either have to be early or tough. Like, that's it. It's the only two options that we have. And by early, we mean strategic, thoughtful, planning. You need to know how you're going to orient around something that matters to you. But if you're not good at that, you better be tough as nails, because there's going to be pain associated with the process. And for me, this was always a super important lesson. But the relationship here in the movement between the sage and the warrior, I think, is there. These two are correlated on the sympathetic quadrant of the axis, right? They're very much inextricably linked, but you can find the dominance between them. But this is where, like, you can be missing one of these as long as the other one is present, and you'll be okay. Like, if you're clever, you don't always have to be tough. If you're tough, you don't always have to be clever, because there's pain associated, and if you're clever, you can avoid the pain. But if you're missing both, you're fucked, right? And you're constantly quitting a process, going back to stage one, spending all your time in ideation, never mobilizing true movement or acceleration towards something that's meaningful. So the dynamic between these two is critical, and it's really accurately represented in the song. Because if you don't have that distillation, and at that point, the distillation is not just like, this is the direction, it's also turn off every other voice. Like, I'm waking up and there is no more second guessing or thinking. That's already happened. The opera portion is done. Now is the time for execution. And this becomes more and more valuable the bigger the project becomes, or the thing that you're trying to achieve. And then the amazing and interesting thing there is moving from the warrior into the shapeshifter. So we've got the rock portion, defiance, distillation, commitment, into acceptance in the very end. Nothing really matters, right? In a way that we believe in by the end of the song. And it's this interesting conclusion. But now we're fully on the x-axis between tension and relaxation, between warrior and shapeshifter. And this is a brilliant conclusion, because we're winding up at the peak of tension, which is complete resistance of the external forces, complete commitment to one voice only, but that you can feel it in the song, just the tension, the aggression, the focus, like I'm in that spot. But it's also, that's the peak of attachment as well. When the full body and mind are committed to this action, like, that's what kills people. That's what breaks people. That's what kills the Olympic athlete. It's what kills the artist on the cusp, is that this is the thing. Why can't the world fucking understand that? You know, like, if it's a business product, or if it's a performance, or if it's anything like this, to get to that point, you have to be so committed. But in that commitment, you are distilling an identity and a force that can fracture if the world doesn't accept it. So this tension moving between now warrior and shapeshifter is brilliant in the song, that it takes you through this arc and then down into the final stage, because the culmination of the song is pure acceptance. The thing is already done. I've already committed the act of murder. The forces of heaven and hell are arguing back and forth. I've stood my ground. Too late, granted, it's too late for it to matter. But I've finally found my voice, my agency. I've put my thing out into the world. Now there's no fight left. There's nothing to discuss. Like, I just have to let it live on its own as a creation. And that can be unbelievably challenging. That can be crushing if you're not prepared to let that thing go. If you write a book and you get a bad review, if you create a business and nobody buys the product, if you have a piece of art or a performance, Joanna, and it doesn't get the reviews or the attendance, like, these are all the points where the warrior gets you to the thing, the creation, but then the shapeshifter has to step in to protect and preserve you after the creation is finished. That's my rant. So I don't know if there are any threads there to pull, but I think it's also worth stating that none of these domains are exclusive. You find elements of the shapeshifter, the warrior, and the sage all in the beginning of the creation. Like, there's a constant interplay between these profiles, because the warrior needs to be present for you just to show up to the idea second day, right? I mean, on minor levels, they're always interacting and vetting and mobilizing and accepting. Like, these things are not exclusive. But I think having the insight that these are internal orientations and not just ideas is so incredible, because all you have to do is diagnose where you are in the process of your own evolution within a thing or to a thing. It could be anything. Are you creating a fucking family or a business or an artistic piece? Where are you in the process? Are you just in pure open skies, envisioning? Are you the asset? Are you at the point where you're like, nah, maybe I made a mistake? Or what if this isn't the right thing to do? Or are you at the point where you're like, no, this is the thing. 100% this is the thing. It's just difficult right now. Or are you in the place where you're now educated, connected, committed, and also accepting the flow? Everybody talks about that last stage, right? You get into, your Eastern mysticism, you get into your, local pop culture and lore around like, the universe has your back and just accept the way of things. But if you haven't been through the other three, that's nonsense. This is a process. If you try to do that at stage one, which is what happened in the song, ironically, you wind up in hell, right? That's another brilliant layer, but it doesn't make any sense. You haven't accepted it. You still want the thing. So what does it mean? Like, just accept the fate of the universe. You're still waking up wanting stuff. You haven't fought your battles. You haven't created the thing. What does acceptance mean? So, yeah. I am passionate about this, and it's something I've lived and relived many, many times, which is why I was really excited about this event. I think that there are so many things, we tend to put art in its own category, but the truth is we're constantly, if we're trying to do anything meaningful in life and not just accepting the status quo, this edge is constantly relived.